Thank you for choosing Reeves Professional Education Services. I am Sean Reeves, and I am instructor for Reeves Professional Education Services. I am an associate certified entomologist and have 15 years experience in the industry. Today's class will be on basic pesticide chemistry. Sit back and enjoy this with us and learn how to use some different formulations for different pests while you're out there working in the field. Let's take a look at the learning objectives of our course. After taking this course, you will be able to explain 1. Classification of pesticides, 2. Pesticides' mode of action or entry, 3. Chemical makeup of insecticides, 4. Insecticide resistance, 5. Insecticide formulations, and 6. The main benefit of this course is for you to be able to choose the right pesticide for a chemical treatment plan. This ability will ensure that you are successful in controlling insects in all environments and situations. One of the first questions we need to ask is, how do we classify insecticides? Pesticides are going to be classified by the group of pests they control. A. Insecticides control insect pests. B. Herbicides control weeds. And C. Rodenticides kill rats and mice. As we look further into insecticide classification, it's important that you know that insecticides can further be classified by the stage of insect development they affect. A. Ovicides are designed to kill eggs. B. Larvicides are designed to kill juveniles. And C. Adulticides target and kill adult insects. It's very important that you understand which types of these products to use and in which situations to use them, because different insects are going to need to be killed in different stages, and these products are going to let you know what stage they kill, and then you can come up with a plan based on that fact. Another step in insecticide classification is by their mode of action, and we've got 6 modes of action listed below. Number 1, A, we're going to start with the stomach poisons. B, we're going to have the contact kills. C, we're going to have residual effect. D, we're going to have dessicant effect. E, respiratory effect. And F, repellent effect. There's actually even another way insecticides can be classified. Insecticide classification can also be based on the chemical makeup of the products. A, we're going to have organics or more natural insecticides. B, inorganics, which don't break down easily in the environment. And C, synthetic organics, which have properties of both organic and inorganic pesticides. One final method of insecticide classification is based on their formulation or method of application. A, you would have dust. B, wettable powders. And C, aerosols. Let's take a look at the mode of action or entry of insecticides. To know which insecticide to use, you must understand the mode of action. Mode of action is basically how the insecticide enters the insect's body. There's going to be 6 different modes of action we will discuss today. They will be listed on the next slide. As we mentioned earlier, here's a list of pesticide application by mode of action. A, stomach insecticides. B, contact insecticides. C, residual insecticides. D, respiratory insecticides. E, dessicant insecticides. And F, non-lethal modes of action. Okay, let's dig in and take a look at stomach insecticides. A, these insecticides must be ingested by the insect. Obviously that would make sense because this is how the products are going to work their way down to the insect's stomach. B, these insecticides enter the insect's body through the midgut where they actually absorb the food. C, examples of these are going to be borates and ant baits. These are going to be very common types of products as you go through your pest management career. The borates are obviously used in like crawl spaces, on fungi. They can also be labeled for termites or other wood-destroying organisms like powder post beetles, things that get down in the wood. Borates are very good in this prospect, but they can also be in ant baits, like gel baits will have borates in them. So borates have a wide range of uses, but as you can imagine, ant baits obviously are going to be a good idea of a stomach insecticide, because what happens is that the scout ants are going to feed on the actual product, bring it back to the nest, regurgitate it, and eventually it gets to the queen, and it affects the stomach of every ant in the colony. Our next group of insecticides is going to be contact insecticides. These products are going to be absorbed by the insect through their integument, trachea, or sensory glands. They have a very short span of effectiveness and usually affect the nervous system of the insect. Example of these products are chlorpyrifos and pyrethroids. And a little bit about these products, obviously you can imagine, these are products that are put out that are more of a contact kill but don't leave a long residual effect, and that's why we mentioned the short span of effectiveness. So obviously you can imagine aerosols are like this. Those of you that hadn't been in the industry for long, you could think of a can of Raid as being this type of product. It's a great contact kill that knocks down the insects, but 30 seconds later it has no effect. So in our industry we have products like 565 and Speckos and some different products like that that come in aerosol that are knockdowns. But keep in mind these are obviously more on the contact side and are really not going to provide you any long-term control. So certain situations these could be great. If you're doing a big clean out for cockroaches, you might use a product like a 565 aerosol just to come in and knock down all the cockroaches. At the same time, obviously you're going to need some residual bait to really knock out the rest of the roaches hiding back in the cracks and crevices. Let's take a look at some residual insecticides. How do these work? Well, insects actually pick up these insecticides when they walk across them. They can also be contact insecticides as well and have a pretty good knockdown effect. Most of these are going to affect an insect's nervous system, and they have a long residual effect. And there's many products that go into this grouping. It wouldn't matter if you were talking about a suspended concentrate like a Termidor, or Suspend has a Polyzone product now that they're saying lasts up to 5 months. Obviously your dust lasts a really long time as well. Unless dust gets wet, they're usually pretty effective. So most of the products you're going to use on an average daily basis are going to be residual insecticide. So it's very important that you know the product you're using. Is it a residual? Is it not? And what is the residual effect? Because at the end of the day, you've got to have a good residual effect, or you're going to leave a client's home and 5 days later they're going to have no protection. So highly suggest you make sure you study your residual insecticides and make sure you know their uses and their purposes and what's the best time and the best place to use them. Let's talk for a minute about Dessicant insecticides. These insecticides work by damaging the protective outer layer of the cuticle of the insect. Damage to this layer causes the insect to lose large amounts of body fluids. And basically when we say desiccant, we just mean the insect dries out. So as this breaks down the outer layer of the cuticle, obviously that's going to cause a big problem for the insect to have that protection not to lose all their moisture. It's kind of like us with, without our skin, we would kind of lose all of our moisture out of our body. So Dessicant insecticides are very effective, and obviously one that comes to mind right off the bat would be a dust type of insecticide. So know which of your products are desiccants, and now you obviously know how they affect the cuticle, and that the insects will actually lose their moisture without that outer layer of the cuticle protecting them. Okay, now we've made it up to the respiratory insecticides. These products enter through the insect spiracles and work through the insect's body's tissues. And I want you to know right off the bat, when we talk about spiracles, we're actually talking about the insect's lungs. This is basically what they breathe through and how they breathe. So remember, these products go right up into the spiracles and then just work right through the body tissues. These also may enter through the soft regions of an insect's body. So obviously there's some softer areas on the underneath of the insect and the integument and areas like that where these products could potentially enter right up through there. A great example of these products would be a fumigant. So obviously if you used a gas like a Vicane or whatever the case may be, this gas is going to enter basically right through the spiracles, and as the insects try to breathe, they're going to breathe in this product, and it's just going to shut down their whole system through their body tissues. Let's look at non-lethal modes of action. What is a non-lethal mode of action? Well, it's actually a repellent type of product that pushes insects away from an area, or B, attractants, which actually attract insects to a certain area. And I guess the idea of a repellent would be almost like a DEET. You spray on your body and it actually repels mosquitoes, in a product such as Cutter or Off or something like that. B, an attractant would be a little bit different. It would attract insects to a certain area. Obviously, a boric acid bait ant gel bait or even a boric acid based cockroach gel bait would be attracted to the area because the peanut butter mixed with the boric acid in the cockroach bait, or the sugar and the jellies mixed with the ant bait. So just keep in mind, these can be non-lethal modes of action that actually attract them, but they can be mixed with a product that actually kills the insects themselves. Okay, we need to look at the chemical makeup of insecticides. There's going to be 3 classes of insecticides based on chemical makeup. These include A, inorganic insecticides, which contain no carbon; B, natural organic insecticides, which are natural and do contain carbon; and C, synthetic organic insecticides, which are a combination of the previous 2. Let's dig a little further into inorganic insecticides. Inorganic insecticides are composed of minerals and metals. Most are not used in the U.S. any longer. The benefits are they provide long-lasting control, and insects have a hard time building resistance to them. Here are some examples of inorganic insecticides. Examples of inorganic insecticides include A, boron compounds such as Timbor, Boracare. The compound in these products is known as boric acid. These are going to be an example of a stomach poison. B, we can look at silica aerogel, which is formulated as a dust. It's slow acting and can be mixed with pyrethrum for faster action. So these are going to be inorganic types of products. They don't break down easy in the environment, so that's how you're going to differentiate the two. And you're going to hear more and more in your years in pest management how people are looking at ways to protect the environment, and people want to go with green products, and they're just really concerned about their family's well-being, their pets, and just the environment itself. So these inorganic insecticides are definitely going to be a problem through the years, and obviously people are going to be wanting to use less and less of these and go more to the natural organics. Now let's take a look at an example of organic insecticide. What is an organic insecticide? These are going to be insecticides that break down in the environment because they don't contain carbon. They are actually going to be known as botanicals. Examples of these products are nicotine and pyrethrum. Pyrethrum is the most common and is composed of the oils of crushed chrysanthemum flower petals. So these products are going to be more and more available out on the market as our society in general is pushing towards organics. As I mentioned earlier, people are really wanting to get away from the inorganics and use things that break down pretty easy in the environment. And you can't blame them, considering the fact of the issues we've had with our water supplies being poisoned and how many people have gotten cancer here in the past few years. And now we're seeing more and more links to different poisons and things we put in our bodies that could be adding to that factor. Now, I'm under the opinion that most of the products we use are pretty safe anyways, but again, the general public, there's going to be differentiation between them and us of what they think the products actually do and what we believe they do. So anytime you can, I highly suggest looking at botanicals and figuring these into your pesticide management plan, because I really think your customers are going to enjoy it. And I also think you're going to find that these products can be very effective on insects. Okay, let's take a look at our last grouping of insecticides based on organics or inorganics. This is going to be your synthetic organic insecticides. This is the largest group of 3 classes of insecticides. These insecticides are obviously created in a laboratory. Examples of these include chlorinated hydrocarbons such as chlordane, DDT, and lindane. These insecticides are very persistent and work on the insect's nervous system. Very few of these products are still available for use today. Let's talk about that for a minute, because most of you have heard of chlordane, DDT, and or lindane. And I would definitely say all of you have heard of DDT, because DDT has been in the news since the 1950s when they started using it, because it was a really great product for mosquito and even bed bug control and just general insect control. It was actually put out by planes all over the United States, and people really thought it was one of the best products ever made. As we're going to talk about later, because of biomagnification and some other issues, we found out that it wasn't such a great product for the environment. Another product, Chlordane, was used for termite control and was just a wonderful product as far as controlling the termites. People used to laugh and say, for 50 years you won't have termites, and they were pretty much right about that, because there's houses today that we still look at repeatedly over and over again that had a Chlordane treatment back in the 60s and 70s, and we still don't have any termites in them. But this product was actually discontinued back in 1985. But these insecticides are going to be very persistent, and they really stay in the environment for a long time. So I really feel like it's a good thing that we're not using these products anymore. I believe these products leach down into the groundwater and eventually get into our drinking water and cause a lot of problems. So some products I believe are really good and really safe, and these are some of the products that I would have some concerns about myself, not just as an applicator, but even if I was just a general person, in society in an area where these are used, these can be a big major problem. As we just mentioned a minute ago, we need to talk about biomagnification. As I had said, this was a big problem with DDT, and one of the main reasons why it's not still on the market. Major concern with these synthetic organic insecticides is going to be your biomagnification. Biomagnification is when insecticides accumulate inside an animal's body. Because of their persistent qualities, these insecticides can have a negative impact on the environment. And that's what we're finding, obviously, with DDT and things like that, because it is still used in other countries. But because of biomagnification, this insecticide is in your natural environment. It's in the water, and it's also in the insects that the birds feed on and things like that. And what happens is that this product, through birds drinking water, birds eating other insects, this product's inside the insects in the water, and the birds were actually building this product up in their body through the biomagnification. And small amounts of this product's not a problem, but as it accumulates in the body, it's not eliminated from the birds, it can become a big issue. So one of the things we figured out with these products is that the bald eagles, their eggshells were getting thinner and thinner. This was a result of biomagnification affecting the eagle's body system. As you can imagine, with the eagle being the national bird in the United States, really quickly environmental groups jumped on this, and even the general population was starting to see that obviously these products were going to be a big problem in the future, and we needed to discontinue them. So you won't hear as much about biomagnification now, but this was a big issue as to why DDT and Chlordane and some of these other products are no longer on the market. Another group of insecticides we need to take a look at is organophosphates. Organophosphates will fall into the category of synthetic organic insecticides. As you can imagine, these are pretty synthetic. In our next sentence, we're going to talk about this, but the chemical makeup of organophosphates is going to be hydrogen, carbon, and phosphorus. And the hydrogen and carbon, obviously, are not what we're concerned about, but imagine that word phosphorus. Hand grenades back in the Vietnam War were made with phosphorus in them. So we're dealing with some pretty serious stuff here, and I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of organophosphates are not on the market now, although there are still some out there. Just be aware of the fact that when you start using words like phosphorus, we can get into some pretty toxic stuff. Granted, these are in small doses, so keep in mind, it's not like, you'd spray something like this and people in the home were dying or anything, but there's some concerns with these types of products we've had through the years. These products also affect the insect's nervous system, and they'll result in the uncontrolled firing of the nerves. So basically, it just drives the insects crazy, their nerves go crazy, and eventually it just breaks down their body or actually kills them from the stress. Organophosphates are generally non-toxic to mammals, but again can be dangerous in large amounts. So keep in mind, as with any insecticide, obviously in a large amount it can be dangerous to anything. So we always need to follow the label, because the label is always going to be the law. An example of an organophosphate is carbiol or 7 dust. A lot of you have seen this because people use it on plants, and those of you that are in horticulture may have even used it yourself. If you're in general pest management, of course, not as much. So keep in mind, organophosphates are still around, but not to the extent they were several years ago. Another group of insecticides we need to take a look at are carbamates. Carbamates are actually very similar to organophosphates in mode of action, but their effects are reversible. An example of these products would be bendiocarb. So just so you know that the organophosphates are obviously not reversible in their effects, and the carbamates are, and that's really the only differentiation between the two. Other than that, they're very similar in nature, very similar in the way they work. So once again, these are not products that we use a ton of anyways, but keep that in the back of your mind that the effects of these are going to be reversible if you're dealing with a carbamate type of product. Next group of insecticides we need to take a look at are probably the most commonly used insecticides out there in the pest management industry. This would be the group called Pyrethroids. Pyrethroids are basically synthetic pyrethrins. So actually, if you can imagine, pyrethrins are going to be your pretty mostly natural products. Your synthetic pyrethrins are going to have another chemical introduced into them in a laboratory. The reason why these products were developed was to be more dependable than the natural pyrethrins. And when I say dependable, obviously the natural pyrethrins can be very effective on insect populations. But when you have that other element of a synthetic product in there, there's another layer that the insect has to live through as they walk through these products. These products are going to be repellents and are avoided by the insect. So you really need to know the insect you're dealing with, and if they're a colonizing insect, if they're a solitary insect, how they work, because if you're dealing with a colonizing insect, I usually wouldn't suggest using a pyrethroid. You really want something that's a non-repellent they'll take back to their nest and kind of poison the whole colony off. Obviously, you can imagine, ant baits would be a non-repellent, but down here at the bottom, we talked about bifenthrin, cypermethrin, and permethrin, and especially bifenthrin is something people use almost average every day in pest control. Talstar is a great example of a bifenthrin product. So these obviously have great uses, occasional invaders, beetles, centipedes. There's a lot of products they're effective on, and they're a good general use insecticide as well. And if your client's not having a problem with ants or something like that, then this very well would be just a great, average everyday product to put around their house. But I think you need to know that these are repellents, and you need to use them wisely, and don't just look at what they're labeled for. Keep in mind the difference of a repellent and a non-repellent, because you're not going to want to use a repellent on a termite colony as much as you are maybe a box elder beetle that's congregating on the outside of the house. The next group of insecticides are going to be phenyl pyrazoles. Phenyl pyrazoles are inhibitors that disrupt the neutral transmissions of insects. These are generally non-repellents. They are effective in killing termites usually within about 10 days. An example of these products is fipronil or termidor. And obviously fipronil is going to be the name of the actual active ingredient, and there's another product called Taurus now that also has fipronil. So keep in mind, we're not necessarily plugging just one product, but I would say these are some of the most effective products you can ever imagine in killing termite colonies. Just because of their non-repellent qualities, the termites will just walk through them, take them right back to the colony, and just eventually track all the way through the colony and poison the whole colony off. Same thing with ants. Termidors or fipronil itself is just very, very effective on killing ants. So these are some of my favorite non-repellent products, and I can tell you in 15 years experience in the pest management industry, the one thing I've noticed is if you use a product like this a couple times a year, it's only labeled to use twice a year, but if you use it twice a year on a house that has an ant problem around the perimeter, usually you won't have any problems. I mean, this is going to be your lockdown product to kill ants. So if you're not using this product as part of your ant management plan, I'd highly suggest it. And it doesn't even have to be used in a liquid form as a suspended concentrate. This also comes in ant gel baits as well, because I know a lot of people are not wanting to really use the liquids as much. So you can get an ant gel bait with the fipronil in it as well. But keep in mind, this is a very effective product for ants and termites, probably the best on the market for either or. Let's take a look at Chloroncotinyl. This is going to include imidacloprid, which is a broad-spectrum termiticide that is used in agriculture and pest control operations. It attacks the stomach as a poison and breaks down the nervous system. Imidacloprid is a systemic insecticide, and therefore it is absorbed in the vascular system of plants. It is a non-repellent insecticide that works within a few days. I want to talk a little bit about imidacloprid because this is a very common product that you would use in termite control, especially a lot of companies that do a lot of real estate deals where they need to keep the price down, and they can't use a fipronil-based product like a Termidor or a Taurus just because of the cost. They would use a product like an imidacloprid. Adonis is a great example of a product that has imidacloprid in it, and also Premise, which would be more of a brand name type of product. But at the end of the day, these are very effective in termite control. One of the reasons why we don't use these as much as we do like a Termidor fipronil-based product is because they don't have that long-term residual effect. I would say the best you'd probably get out of a product like this maybe is 1 to 3 years down in the soil, because the conditions outside are just going to break these products down over a pretty short period of time. As I mentioned, this product attacks the stomach as a poison and breaks down the nervous system. So you see that recurring theme. These products work a lot the same way, where they break down the nervous system or they attack the stomach, or a little bit of both. It's a systemic insecticide, and this is important to know because you really need to watch where you spray this product, because if somebody has a vegetable garden right next to their house, or fruit trees, or any type of plant they might eat on, obviously you need to make sure that you don't put imidacloprid on there, because it's going to be absorbed right into the vascular system of the plant. So read your labels always. I can't stress that enough. Every label is different, and you really need to know what the label says because it's a law. But this is a product, again, I wouldn't use in certain areas. But it is a great non-repellent insecticide that works within a few days. And once again, this is another option you can offer your clients that's a little bit less expensive than some of the other types of products. Unfortunately, you're trading a little bit of quality for that less expense. Let's look at Pyroles. These are contact termiticides that work as a stomach poison, ultimately decreasing the energy of the insect. These products are quite effective against ants and termites. An example of these products is Chlorophynophora or Phantom. A lot of you may have used Phantom, or you will through the years, but I would say it works kind of similar to what fipronil does. That Chlorophynophora just eventually decreases the energy of the insect, and it's a pretty good non-repellent type of product that you can use in certain situations. Another good thing about this product is that obviously it can be used indoors as opposed to fipronil-based products, which usually can, at least the suspended concentrates of fipronil like Termidor and Taurus and things like that. So this is another great product for you to use on some of your ant types of products, and also termites. It can work very well. So keep in mind, this is something you need to know about, and Chlorophynophora is a very effective product. The next set of products we need to take a look at are insect growth regulators. One type of IGR is a chitin inhibitor. When the immature stages of insects are exposed to this type of product, they become incapable of completing the molting process, and then they eventually die. These products are commonly used in baiting systems for termites. Examples of these products include difluvenzuron and hexafluomuron. These are very common now in the baiting systems you're going to see for termites. Obviously, baiting systems are becoming a big thing. You're seeing more and more of these systems, and most of you are familiar with the Centricon type of system, which has become very common in most areas. Now, the reason why people are going to these types of products is because obviously we've got a green movement out there. People are very concerned about insecticides and termiticides in general out in the environment. So you're going to get more and more people that want to go to these baiting systems for termites. And these IGRs, these chitin inhibitors, are very effective on termites as well. You're just going to see more and more of this through the years. So keep in mind, even if you sell liquid types of termite treatments, you're going to be competing against these types of products, and you're going to need to know how they work. And also, you very well may want to go to using some type of baiting system, because I do believe more and more people are going to want this as time goes on. Another set of insect growth regulators is juvenoids. These are products which disrupt the metamorphosis and prevent the maturation of insects so they cannot reproduce or complete their development. They have very little effect on non-insect species and are effective in very small doses. Examples of these products are going to be methoprene and pyroproxyfen. And one reason why I want to talk about these products are these are very effective on fleas. I know most of you obviously are dealing with fleas as you go through your daily career, and maybe not every season of the year, but the matter of fact is that you're going to see more and more fleas. Fleas are especially becoming a problem here in the past, I would say 8 to 10 years. I've seen just more and more flea problems, and they're becoming harder and harder to control. So obviously you're going to need a product that has a knockdown kill and an insect growth regulator, and these are just a couple of the ideas of insect growth regulators that are really effective on fleas. So keep in mind, these keep the fleas or whatever insect you're treating with them, they keep them as juveniles where they can't mature and reproduce. So basically what you're doing is you're almost sterilizing the colony by putting out these juvenoids through the insect growth regulators. Another issue we're going to deal with in our career in pest management is going to be insecticide resistance. Understanding insecticide resistance is critical in any insect control program. Resistance is the lessening of an insecticide's effectiveness due to changes in the target population. So after an insecticide application is applied, a certain number of insects may have resistance to the product you laid down. These insects may reproduce and pass down those resistant genes. And I guess a good example of this is, say you put down an insecticide and you kill 98% of the insects in the area. Say maybe it's cockroaches. Well, if 2% of those insects were resistant to the product and those insects mate with new insects coming in, what do you think is going to happen? Let's say in the new population, maybe only half of the new insects are resistant to the product because about half of them got the genes of the resistant insects. This is going to be a problem because then again, those insects are going to mate, and what's going to happen is you're going to have more and more insects as that pyramid builds that are resistant to the product. So we're going to talk a little bit in the next slide about how we can help control some of this issue. As we talk further about insecticide resistance, you need to know that insects may also build a resistance to insecticides by avoiding them. The best way to avoid insecticide resistance is also rotation of insecticides at the treatment location. You should also rotate between chemical classes. Obviously, insects can build resistance to insecticides by avoiding them. We talked a little bit earlier about bifenthrin. It's a repellent type of product. Well, as you can imagine, in any treatment location, insects may detect that insecticide and may actually resist it by completely avoiding the product. The best way to avoid insecticide resistance is going to be rotation of insecticides at the treatment location. You obviously don't want to use the same classes of chemicals over and over again. And I think some of you are probably still treating some people's homes monthly, or definitely doing monthly treatments on commercial buildings. This can be a major problem. We talked about insects having a target population that is going to be resistant to the product, and they're just going to continue to multiply and pass down those resistant genes. So make sure you have a good rotation of products, but also make sure your products, as you rotate them, still have that common goal of treating the insect population that you're dealing with at any location. Let's take a look at some insecticide formulations. In its pure form, an insecticide is known by its active ingredient. Insecticides may also be combined with one or more inert ingredients to become a formulation. First and foremost, the applicator must understand the biology of the pest to be controlled and where they are found. And obviously that's key number one. You've really got to understand the habits, the nesting habits, the eating habits, so on and so forth of the pest to be controlled. Because if you don't understand those habits, you're really not going to have any idea what formulation to use and how it's going to affect the target population of the insects. Obviously, insecticides are also mixed with inert ingredients as well as active ingredients. If you look on the label, a lot of times you may see 2 to 3% of the active ingredients in the insecticide, the rest is an inert ingredient. But the inert ingredients may also help the effectiveness of the active ingredients. So keep in mind, these two products work together even though one of them is the actual active ingredient. And in its pure form, the insecticide is going to be known by its active ingredient. So when we talk about insecticides, and I've mentioned this several times today, but bifenthrin can have several different names for the actual product it's in, but mostly you need to know it's going to be known by its active ingredient to those of us actually doing the treatments themselves. Okay, let's continue to talk about some of these insecticide formulations. The main types of formulations are listed below on our PowerPoint here. A, we're going to have oil solutions. B, emulsifiable concentrates. C, wettable powders. D, granules. E, dust. And F, baits. The first formulation we're going to take a look at is oil solutions. Oil concentrates are made by dissolving a high concentration of technical matter in a solvent that holds the pesticide in a solution. Oil solutions offer a quick knockdown of insects. Oil solutions flow easily into cracks and crevices. Advantage of these are good adhesion to surfaces and they store well. Some of the disadvantages of oil solutions include a higher cost, can damage rubber and plastic, have an odor, and penetrate porous surfaces. So to talk a little bit about the oil solutions, I think these are very effective in certain situations. I know these can be effective in cockroach control because they really have a good quick knockdown of insects. Also, some people, if you're treating a bee's nest or a bald-faced hornet's nest, those of you that have the big football-shaped paper nest or a wasp nest, may want to use some of these types of products because they do offer a quick knockdown and they can actually save you from getting stung several times. So just keep in mind these have good adhesion to surfaces and they store really well. So these are products you're going to use through your career, and they're not necessarily going to be your average everyday products, but they do have their time and place and can be very effective in those areas. Let's take a look at emulsifiable concentrates. Emulsifiers are a substance that allows a material which doesn't dissolve in water to be suspended in water. These emulsifiers allow you to mix an oily insecticide with water. Some of the advantages of these products include they can be used on surfaces that may be harmed by oils. They penetrate porous surfaces while still leaving the insecticide on the surface. This can be very important because if they penetrate the surface and leave the insecticide on the surface, then the insects can still pick them up. And we talked about oils, which are very similar to emulsifiable concentrates, but these oils actually sink down into the porous material and don't leave that visible barrier on the top for the insects to walk through. Some of the disadvantages of these products are they can be good conductors of electricity and shouldn't be used around electrical equipment. So obviously you don't want to be spraying this type of product right on open electrical equipment because you don't want to get electrocuted. Let's take a look at wettable powders. Wettable powders are made by coating of an inert powder with an insecticide and adding a wetting agent so that the material can be diluted in water. These products actually don't dissolve in water, instead the particles themselves form suspensions. And I like wettable powders, and before we get into the advantages and disadvantages of them, wettable powders are really effective products on spiders and areas where you can't put dust. So we have major brown recluse problems in the area I've been working for the past 12 years, and wettable powders have been one of the products that have really helped us out in these areas. And I think probably from there we need to take a look a little bit into the advantages, because one of the reasons why they're so effective on spiders is they do have a long residual activity. Also, another good thing about them is they're less toxic to plants and they're not easily absorbed through the skin. And that's kind of interesting because when you look at these products, you would think, okay, they're a powder, so they would be easily absorbed through the skin, but the way their chemical makeup is, they don't easily absorb through your skin, and I think that's a good property of these products. Some of the disadvantages include they're going to leave a visible residue on surfaces. So one of the problems we have with these products, and nowadays a lot of people are putting in laminate or hardwood flooring, we're seeing residues building up on these surfaces, and they can also build up on the baseboards as well, even if it's in a carpeted area. So keep in mind this residue on surfaces can be a problem, so you really need to pick and choose where you use these insecticides. They can also be inhaled during preparation, and these require constant agitation. Obviously, as they're coming in like a powder or dust type of form, obviously you take a spoon and you put them into your B&G or sprayer, you could actually inhale this product pretty easily. So make sure you're wearing the right PPE when you're mixing these products, and always follow the label, as I always say on that. But again, this is something that can be easily inhaled. I've seen that dust just take off on a windy day when you try to move it from the container to your B&G. And these require constant agitation. And that's very important to note, because these are not products that you just mix, let your sprayer sit for an hour, and then you go right to spraying. I constantly agitate these products by shaking my sprayer, even as I'm walking through a client's home, commercial building, whatever I'm treating, because I know if they're not agitated, that suspension won't be right in the water. So just keep in mind you need to constantly agitate these, these are going to be a little rough on your sprayers too. These are products that I generally don't use in my everyday sprayer. Matter of fact, one of the things we're going to do in my company is we're going to take the sprayers and mix up some products, just the wettable powders in certain sprayers, and then have those sprayers on the truck. And maybe it's a $15, decent plastic sprayer, but at least then I don't have to worry about it eating away at my good B&Gs that obviously can be in the range of $180 or $200. The next group of products we're going to take a look at are dust. And I can just tell you right off the bat, dust are one of my favorite types of products. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the disadvantages of them as well, but I can tell you dust are my favorite product to use on spider control accounts in the void areas. And we talked a little bit about the wettable powders, obviously in the open areas, but dust can be so very effective in void areas. And by the way, not just for spiders. I mean, they can be really good if you've got ants nesting in a wall, even cockroaches back in certain areas, because a lot of times you can only get a dust back in certain areas, so your dust are really going to be something you can put in those voids that's going to run the insects out. The dusts themselves are made by combining an insecticide with an inert powder. Often these act as a stomach insecticide on insects when they ingest the particles while cleaning their bodies. Made of fine powders, they can actually float in the air really easily. Advantages of these products are going to include they easily penetrate cracks and crevices, and they have a really good residual activity. On the disadvantage side, we can talk about that they leave a visible residue, and they lose effectiveness if they become wet. Right off the bat, you definitely don't want to take these types of products and applicate with them inside a house. I had a guy working for me several years ago that took his duster and shot it all around the baseboards. Well, guess what? We talked about wettable powders leaving a residue. Well, honestly, it looked like somebody had just dumped baby powder all on the baseboards of this really nice home. This is actually a singer's home, so you can imagine that the outcome of that was a little bit dicey. Had to work that customer around to understand that, we had made a mistake. But at the end of the day, these products are really good back in cracks and crevices and wall voids and attics and crawl spaces, but they're going to leave a visible residue wherever you put them. With that being said, you don't want to applicate real heavily with these either. And I know a lot of times people will say, well, I don't see a dust layer. Well, you shouldn't, because there should be a really thin layer of this dust. So follow your label really close, because it takes a very small layer of this dust to have some real good effectiveness. Another issue with the dust too, obviously, is an inhalation issue. So if you're going to be applicating with the dust in an enclosed area, without a doubt, I would definitely wear a respirator, because you're just not going to be able to stop yourself from breathing these in or inhaling them. And we've got some natural dust now too. I mean, obviously there's some eco dust, there's diatomaceous earth. Most of you have probably heard of those products, or you will. But then you've got a lot of synthetic dust too, like your Delta dust, and there's several different other types of dust that can be synthetic. But keep in mind, you want to make sure that you don't breathe these in, because that's going to be your biggest issue with these dusts, is the inhalation issue. Next product we're going to talk about here is a product you're going to hear more and more about, and most of you are probably already using quite often in your pest management operations. This is going to be the baits. Baits combine insecticides with an attractant, usually in the form of food for the pest. I want to stop right there, because there's some good and some bad about that, as you can imagine, but the baits are going to become more and more common as we talk about green pest management. People becoming more and more concerned about their health, the environment, the health of their pets, so on and so forth. So these baits can be really good products. On the other hand, they can also be a problem, as we'll talk about, because of the fact that they can attract non-target species. If you put down a peanut butter bait for a cockroach, what's the chances that somebody's dog could get into that peanut butter bait? Probably pretty good. So you really need to follow the label and make sure these products are used in cracks and crevices and voids where non-target organisms don't come into contact with them. Another thing about the baits is they can use pheromone attractants to control flies, cockroaches, and stored product pests. So it's not just the fact that they're using these products as a baiting system or something they feed on. They can really attract flies and cockroaches and stored product pests out from their nesting areas. It can be really effective because of that fact, because it actually draws them out of certain areas. Baits come in several different types of formulations. They can come in paste, they can come in granules, pellets, or even liquid. So I can just tell you right now, paste would be similar to a Max Force or an Advion cockroach gel paste. Granules, Nibang granules are a real common granule, and there's several different brands. I'm just telling you some of the ones I use, but as they come in these granules, ant baits and granules can be really effective because you sprinkle them around a nesting area, and these ants will pick them up, carry them back to the nest, and then through this bait, they'll work them all the way through the colony, where eventually, as they're regurgitated, they'll get all the way to the queen and actually poison the queen off. So, they come in several different formulations, but they can also be very effective. These control social insects like ants and termites well because they're passed through the colony, as I was just saying, and we talked a little bit about the ants, but once again, I can't tell you enough that termites are a colonizing insect with several different castes in that colony. So you're going to need to know that these baits are going to be passed right down through those castes, again, all the way down to the queen, and it's going to kill the colony. So baits are going to be usually, obviously, non-repellents, and they're going to be a food bait that's picked up by the colonizing insect. So I just can't tell you enough about baits when you're dealing with colonizing insects. These are also usually slow acting, so the foraging insects can bring their products back to the colony. This is important because as the scouts and the workers pass these products through the colony, these baits don't need to kill them too fast because they won't have time to be regurgitated and fed through the colony all the way to the queen. So that's why baits are a little more slow acting, and I know a lot of you are treating ants and termites, and people want this instantaneous, okay, so you came out and sprayed, it's been 72 hours, I'm still seeing ants. Well, the reason why is because these baits are slow active, and they have to work over a period of time. You can't kill a whole colony of ants in 72 hours because their food chain and their food cycle does not work that quick. So keep in mind as you're talking to your clients, say these products are made to work in a certain way, here's how they work, here's why, and do you want me to spray a product that's non-repellent and may repel the ants for 3 days, or do you want them gone for 3 months until we come back and do our next service? So that's how the baits work. You're going to hear more and more about baits through the years. As pest management's changing, I can tell you suspended concentrates are getting less and less, and baits are becoming more and more part of our everyday work. One thing we're going to need to talk about is the future of chemical control. The EPA is continuously looking at ways to lessen the impact of pesticides in the environment. Future pesticides approved by the EPA will be less persistent, guidelines for use is going to become more restrictive, and accountability for applicators will become more stringent. And I want to talk a little bit about this because obviously the EPA is going to be one of the watchdogs that's really watching what we do in the pest management industry. So as applicators and owners of businesses, we need to be looking at how we're using the pesticides and what their effect's going to be on the environment. There's a big green movement out there where people want to use organic insecticides. Really, people want to use organics on everything. It's not just from the pest management side. People are even looking at this at the food they eat and what types of causes of cancer and what types of things can come out of that as well. So just remember, people are really looking at this, and as applicators, we're really going to have to look at what we do out there in the field. Future pesticides approved by the EPA are going to be less persistent. So as you can imagine, the residual effects of your insecticides is really going to start to lessen as the years go on. Everybody's looking for ways to use a new insecticide that's not going to harm the environment, but unfortunately, the more persistent an insecticide is, the more harm it can do to the environment, so persistence is going to start to lack in our insecticides. Guidelines for use are also going to be more restrictive. That's a simple one. You talk about maybe treating wasp up in the eaves or a soffit vent of a house. Well, if you're spraying a liquid product up there and it's windy, that overspray or that drift's really going to get carried away. We're having a lot of problems with honeybees, so you can imagine honeybees are the main pollinators of fruits and several different crops. Honeybees are going to be more and more protected in the future, and we're really going to be under a microscope as pesticide applicators on how we use the products. So the laws are really changing already in the past couple years about treating with pesticide products more than 3 feet high. Make sure you always read the label, and it's going to tell you more about these types of issues. Another issue is going to be dust when you use them outside. We use a thing called a bee pole at my company. Has a little pump duster at the bottom and a bunch of extension rods you put together. Well, this thing can go over 20 feet high. The problem with that is when you pump that dust out of a little duster at the top, you can pump it into eaves, you can pump it into a soffit vent in behind the siding, and that's great. But it's very easy for the wind to pick up that drift and carry that, and dust are very effective on honeybees or any type of bees or wasps. So once again, our non-target organism can really be a problem with a treatment like this. Another thing we're going to need to take a look at is the accountability for applicators becoming much more stringent. I can tell you on the state level, they're watching more and more how we use pesticides and rodenticides. Matter of fact, I know somebody that was fined $250 earlier this year just for not putting a rodenticide in an approved container. So you got to remember, you really got to follow the labels, and you've got to suspect in the future that state, local, and even the federal government's really going to be watching what we do, and we need to make sure we're following all of our labels. Let's go over a quick review of what we just learned. Pesticides can be classified by their mode of action. By understanding the mode of action, you can choose the right pesticide for a particular pest treatment. You must understand the difference between organics and inorganics and their impact on the environment. Remember, you must factor in an insecticide resistance when coming up with a chemical control plan. Make sure to pick the right insecticide formulation based on the biology of the insect to be treated, and know the future of chemical control and how that's going to affect your job.